Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Psychonaut Sessions, your home for all things psycho. This is your host, Daniel Moeller. We are definitely going psycho today because today we're going to take a look at Grips. This is what is known as probably one of the most seminal outlaw comics of the mid 1980s. So, definitely not for children. This episode, please put on something else for your kids, not this episode. Definitely cover their eyes. And let's take a look at Grips. So, Grips came from a company called Silverwolf. I love Silverwolf books. I love all Silverwolf books. Silverwolf was a company that was an independent company, of course, that was or mostly around during the mid 1980s. They only lasted a few years, started by Kris Silver. Don't really know much else of what Kris Silver has done, but Grips is probably one of the most notable comics that came out of this line. It was definitely known for its sort of power comicsy outlaw sort of take. A lot of the artwork was very amateurish, all black and white. I think they had plans actually to do some color books. I've not seen any, but again, I'm not the most well-read comics person in the world, I would say. But if there are any color books out there, I would be interested to take a look at them. But definitely, I'm much more tuned into this black and white line. So another notable thing about Grips is that it is that kind of the premier book of artist Tim Vigil. Tim Vigil has gone on to be one of the most noteworthy outlaw comics artists in the industry, period. Still doing work today. You can check out his work on Instagram, and I know he's got a Patreon. Definitely not for kids in any way, shape, or form. Tim Vigil likes to keep it raw. This is probably one of the most tame works of his that I've seen, actually. After this, he was well known for doing the book Faust, which actually it looks like may even have a movie coming out or a TV series or something. They have got some the rights got option for some sort of property, so IP, so that's cool. Good for Tim Vigil. Despite looking past all the gore and the weirdness of his work, and again, this is the more tame of his works, Tim Vigil has excellent ink work. I love watching him ink. I think he's got a wonderful craft. He still inks with brushes to this day. And this is one of his first works ever that saw a major print run anyway. So right off the bat, we're actually just getting an ad for the Dungeoneers, which was another Kris Silver book. Haven't picked that one up yet, but looks kind of fun. Kind of like a bunch of D&D type characters that are going through a dungeon, some multiple adventures. But we get hit hard from the very beginning with Grips, where we have two individuals walking down the street, getting mugged. It looks like that they're going to possibly rape the girl, and in comes our hero Grips. So there's a whole tone of books that were coming out around this time. This is 1986. And you'll see a lot of undertones of like The Crow and other things like that, where grim and gritty was the thing. Get as bloody as you can, get as weird and psycho, because to them that meant realistic. I think it was just a reaction to a lot of the superhero books that were out at the time from Marvel and DC, just being more for quote unquote kids, and not really kind of whetting the palate of people that wanted more. They wanted to see in comics the same thing that they saw in, for instance, like a Death Wish or a Dirty Harry movie or something. So some blood right off the bat. Grips is kicking ass. Definitely some kind of I hate to say this because I admire Tim Vigil so much. This is his earliest work, but a lot of sort of kind of amateurish quality in terms of, he's just getting his start. I mean, this poor guy's foot looked like it's being broken in half or something, but he's actually just kicking this dude and breaking his face. So still working out anatomy, still working out perspectives. I mean, it's hard. You got to get a good 100 pages or more under your belt before you can really start getting comfortable with this sort of stuff. So just your typical, he takes everybody out, but brutally. He's not Spider-Man. He's not even Batman. He's even worse. In fact, every time he's taking someone out, he's really loving it. He's often he'll sit there and say, "Look at the blood," and gets really driven, and we get this like spike driven through this guy. So he's got spikes that come out that shoot out of his wristbands, and then single spikes that come out as blades that he can cut everybody up with. So a lot of blood, a lot of gore, and he's just digging it and having a good time. So kind of wild. And then whenever he saves the couple, he's just like, "Hey, go do a good deed for someone else." And they're like, "What?" After watching this guy just butcher these dudes, completely impale them, gut them, everything. And they're just like, and he takes off. So interesting character right from the bat. And what's even more interesting is the character of, I can't remember his name, but the alter ego of Grips is a comic book artist, and he is a comic book artist for the comic book called Fat Ninja. And Fat Ninja is actually one of the other primary books of the Silverwolf line. So they were doing this kind of meta thing where he was constantly being hounded by the editor, by the writer, Kris Silver, publisher and writer of these books. The character is to get the pages in for Fat Ninja at the same time. So fun little meta narrative there. He's drawing at night after he's kicking some major ass, and then gets up first thing in the morning and pushes himself. He seems to really get off on the pain. So again, that foot's kind of awkward, still kind of working out those perspectives. But you can tell, despite the pencil work and anatomy, that he's really laying it in with the brush. We do see a little bit of duotone stuff here and there, so that's pretty cool. Love seeing that in my early outlaw books. He gets some billy clubs in, starts playing with them. I actually, for these couple of pages, I had no idea what he was doing. I didn't understand. He's got the clubs, he's messing with it, and it's a ball. Like, I was like, what's happening here? Whoosh, huh? And I figured out later in the book that these billy clubs contract into these like pellet size forms. So he can put them on his belt, so he can carry them around. But I didn't get that. So you get the sense that he's just this grassroots guy. He's just a comic book artist who is, in his spare time, just plotting out and hunting down criminals. And he's apparently even figured out where a particular drug bust has gone down, so he's kind of plotting his course here with a city map, listening in, so he's got some equipment where he's listening in on when they're going to meet, and he suits up, and he's got all this equipment and everything. Really nice, cool, striking image there by Tim Vigil. And Grips takes off. We don't really know what motivates this character so far. There's no backstory. We're going to look at two issues today. Not a whole lot there. Got some cool shading there with the I think that's duotone, maybe, yeah, that's duotone, zipatone, possibly. So he sneaks up on these guys doing the drug bust, and so we get more just him ripping people to shreds. They're getting out of the car. Definitely Vigil's trying to play with layouts a little bit here. Gets a little confusing, but I love all the ink. I love the black, so I have fun trying to figure it out. So, and it was a little difficult at first to kind of figure out, okay, he's got blades that come out and he has blades that shoot out, and they just pulverize these guys. They're worse than bullets. He's definitely got some martial arts prowess, so this guy's definitely been trained. A lot of blood, a lot of gore, and here's where I figured out, okay, he snaps that little thing on his belt and the billy club shoots out, and he's able to use it and use it as a defense mechanism while he takes somebody else out. So it I think Kris Silver and Tim Vigil were just let's get as crazy and brutal as we can. The one thing I really miss about comics nowadays is you don't get to see full fight scenes like this. I really miss that. A lot of times when I look in a comic nowadays, a fight scene is really just a splash page of everybody in action. You don't get the full sequential effect like you do in a lot of comics from especially the 80s. They really quite perfected it. Marvel did, back then as well, I think, a lot of their street level stuff. So here we get some more scenes of him working on his book. He gets called by Kris Silver, who's the writer of this book and Fat Ninja, telling him he needs to get his pages in. He's listening to newsreels about this vigilante on the loose, which is him. The police obviously don't like him because they don't like anybody taking their law in the whole hand. So we get the big bad here. He's just your typical crime boss. He's got this vigilante taking out all his stuff. He's pissed off. I really love this shading here. So there's moments here in these books where it's just kind of plain ink work, and that's fine, and it looks good. And then he's got this zip tone shade along with his brush work that's just gorgeous. I mean, this looks like something that would come from Crumb or Mad Magazine. I don't know. I love it. So at this point, Grips goes to a house where some stuff he knows is going down, where the big bosses are, and then this comic ends with two big kind of weird looking dudes with masks, and he's like, all right, had to happen sooner or later, and getting ready for the fight. And that's where it ends. I'm a little confused. I noticed here that it says Liberty 86, but Tim Vigil is the artist of this book. Now, I do notice that this drawing definitely looks a little bit different than the rest of the book. So is that somebody different, somebody new? If anybody knows, let me know. I'm definitely interested. And then this was cool. Portfolio sets of Grips artworks being sold at the time. Each portfolio set is $3. Add $1 for the entire order for shipping. Wow. If only I could go back in time. Like, that would be really fun. Some really cool stuff to get. I bet whoever owns these now, that stuff is worth a good pot of money. So then we get the first letters column from Kris Silver. He always signs this stuff K-A-S. I can't remember what his middle name is. Gripes to Grips. So he's basically just setting up, send your letters in. These letters are always so kind of funny. It starts out, here I am sitting in front of my Macintosh and I'm trying to think of something to write for this first Grips letter. Okay, well, that took up 5 lines. There's this tone a lot of times with people that do these books at the time in the mid 80s where they're just like, okay, well, here's your book. That was hard. Blah, blah, blah. It's this very kind of grassroots, just white collar sort of attitude, or white collar, listen to me, blue collar sort of attitude, and it's funny. Anyway, it's just like, come on, please write us that we did this book. This character is way violent, as I'm sure you've noticed, and that was kind of the intent. We just wanted to go all out and see what we could do. It was pretty revolutionary at the time. This was a pretty nutty book back then. Then we get a big old Silverwolf logo, which is so badass. It has one of the best logos in all of comics ever, I think. And then we get their logo on the back with a few of the other books that were out at the time. Grips, Fat Ninja, as I said, Dungeoneers, and then the Eradicators was their team book. I don't have many of the Eradicators, although I do want to get them. I do have a couple of offshoots of the Eradicators, Thieves, and a couple of others that I'm going to take a look at sometime. So that's Grips number 1. A lot of their first books of the line had this border effect, and then they later abandoned that. And here we get Grips number 2. Now, again, with the different artists, this does not seem like Tim Vigil's work to me, and there's nothing in the inside that really indicates that. And does seem to be some kind of signature in the blood, Zibblat or Zib. I don't know, but definitely looks like it could be someone else. Sitting there with his blades, kind of a cool cover. I like the border of the first issues, but also it does kind of take away a little bit from the image itself. So it was probably a good move, I guess, on their part. I always like picking up a Silverwolf book though and getting that border. So in issue number 2, we actually get a letter in the beginning, like an editorial letter, just kind of talking about like where they're at and how many books they have out. What was interesting that I read here, well, first of all, in the last letter, he talked about writing on his Macintosh. One thing of note is that Silverwolf is one of the first comics to use a computer for lettering. So that's pretty interesting of note. But also here they talk about a new book that's coming out called Stetch, and the entire issue had to be restarted because with a new artist, and says, "Welcome aboard, Rob Liefeld," and we expect the book to be a little late. So this was actually, and let's see, I think I have a copy. I don't have a copy of Stetch, but I have a copy. Well, I guess the book is somewhere else. I thought I had a Silverwolf book on hand that had Stetch in the back. Hold on, let me take a look. There we go. That is not Rob Liefeld. That is I can't remember his name. But this was actually the first contracted comic book job Rob Liefeld ever received, but he ended up dropping out because I think he got a job somewhere else, and I think it was with Megaton at the time. Alright, but enough of that. Let's go ahead and take a look at issue 2. Another thing that Kris Silver talked about is that there was a line of Silverwolf games that they were creating. 2 of them of note being Holocaustic Dungeons and Arena. So, Holocaustic Dungeons sounds great. And then all of these other titles that they were planning on putting out. So, I don't know if they ever reached that amount, and I know they were wanting to go in color as well, but who knows. So this issue, Tim Vigil, you can really tell is hamming it up. He is really escalated from issue 1 to issue 2. The lettering here is great. Just the fluid nature of the characters, that he's got that really 3D quality to his work. And then we jump right into the fight. So there's definitely a difference in this, but also, again, Liberty. So is that Tim Vigil's signature back then? What's going on? Somebody needs to help me out here. I'm obviously not well versed in Tim Vigil lore, even though there's a really good shoot interview with him on the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, if you go look that up on YouTube. So we get thrown right in the middle of this like great battle. We get a spike through somebody's head, a lot of screaming. I mean, Grips is not, he's not a likable guy. He's screaming insults. He loves the fight. He loves to hurt and maim. He's psycho. He's psycho, not in the good sense. Not in like, keep it psycho kind of psycho. Like, he's psychotic. Completely cuts this guy's nards off, and just leaves him to rot. And then so he was in this building and watches the bad guys drive away. And tells them to meet me at a certain place at a certain time because he's got all their drugs and money and stuff. So then we get a little daytime action here of Grips as a regular guy walking into a computer store in the 80s. So, of course, we've got to have mohawks. You always have to have a person with a mohawk. And goes to buy a computer, and the fella that he bought the computer from was the fella in issue 1, who he saved him and his wife, and starts putting his computer together. And this is like a big deal, him using a computer, and he's afraid he's wasting his time. And that's really it. You don't, I guess he's going to use it to fight crime, but this is like an early version of a computer, and it's kind of funny the way he's interacting with it. Like it's this, well, I don't know, I guess I'll give this thing a chance. So we go back to the crime boss's lair, and we're getting introduced to this character that the crime boss is hiring to take out the vigilante Grips. A lot of really cool dark inking action. I mean, this is so dead on 80s and outlaw 80s. So eventually we kind of get to the point where Grips is just on his routine and pumping up for this like big event. So more of him just being completely psycho, interacting with his computer a little bit, and having this like reticence towards using a Macintosh, but knowing it's something he has to do. Gets suited up, goes out and meets those fellows at midnight. He's got in his hand the drugs and the cash, and instead of working a deal with them, which is what they were hoping would happen, he again, of course, I mean, this is Grips, so what did you think was going to happen? Some cool lettering boxes here. The great thing about 80s outlaw comics is the black blood. The black blood is like the signature item. Really cool perspective Tim Vigil is playing with here as well, in the shading here. That's all done by hand, by the way, so really good job there. So he's really stretching himself with this particular issue, and it's really fun to see. The storytelling and the way that the panels flow is way better, way easier. He's experimenting a lot more as well. And then we get this final interaction with this guy who's known as Deathborg, which is a lot like, Deathblow and other one-eyed cyborg type characters, Deathlock, Deathblow, from Marvel and DC. So it's kind of a take on that. And Grips has got this like look on his face, which is kind of funny. Then after that, just a bunch of mail order stuff. You can order a bunch of the other Silverwolf things, and then a couple of letters that came in. So everybody's pretty much just saying bravo, and this guy actually has some gripes, and they address every single one of them, and it's pretty much just like, yeah, whatever. You obviously don't get it, but nothing big. You can tell this is the computer lettering from an old Macintosh when you look close, so that's kind of fun. And then you can mail order form here, although anybody who took the back of their comic off to order more, just I cannot believe you. And here's some ads for those Silverwolf games. So Holocaustic Dungeons and Arena. Holocaustic Dungeons is a game of futuristic dungeons, a place of scientific weapons as well as archaic weapons where traps and adversaries wait to destroy any unsuspecting adventurer who may travel through. This game may be played solo or with as many people as you can stand. So a lot of fun. And then Arena is a game which takes you past all of the hocus pocus of the adventure. There are no longer good guys and bad guys. There's just you and your opponent. You win or you lose. You live or you die. Can you meet the challenge? So that they both sound like kind of a lot of fun, and got interesting concepts. Do these games exist out there, ladies and gentlemen? Something I definitely would like to check out. So anyway, my first dive into Silverwolf. I promise next time it won't be as gory, and I might try to find one of their kind of interesting, obscure ones. There's an anthology that's got some kind of cool, magical things in it that I'm going to dive into, but I couldn't cover Silverwolf and not touch on Grips because it's grip. It's a legendary piece of work. I only have issue 1 or 2, so I'm always aching to pick up the rest just to complete the run. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good time in your life and keep it psycho.